No home runs in this pod. We're working station to station. I am back with my co-host and battery mate Dustin, as always. Moving on from the World Series, we did have some predictions to start the year, and I think we wanted to touch on them. Dustin, take it away.
So I'll try to move through these quick. There's quite a bit. It's not just the predictions, but it's also just about the players themselves. And we kind of went through each one and we talked about each one. And I picked out a few here that I thought were interesting in terms of what we said about them and what ended up happening. I wanted to highlight some that we were kind of correct on and some that we weren't. I think one was Dalton Varsho, which we just talked about, so we won't rehash him. Another one was Chris Bassett. So obviously Chris Bassett was new to the team this year. He was kind of a replacement for Ross Stripling. We said that, he would kind of be Stripling with a little more consistency in it and, some pedigree. And, that turned out be right. I mean, that's one sort of feather in the cap of Ross Atkins this year is there was a lot of people kind of saying, wow, Ross Stripling, he was so good. We should re-sign him. And Chris Bassett, blah, blah, blah. Maybe, we're not going to get that. Turns out that Bassett was much better than Stripling this year. He had a sub 3.5 ERA and, so we were kind of correct. I'm actually quite pleased about Bassett. What do you think about him?
I had said before the season that he would be a success if he appeared in 30 games. He actually appeared in 33. So
Yeah.
good from that. And that kind of ties into consistency, right? And we definitely saw that throughout the season that, he goes out there every time he gets the ball, and most of his starts were quite good performances and something you knew what you're going to expect from him. We did say that a sub 3.5 ERA, would have been a success. I
3.6.
Yeah,
Yeah.
3.6 was his ERA, so we were close.
But 200 innings, 33 games, I think that's good enough. I
I think,
think we can
yeah,
call ourselves correct on that one.
yes, I think we can.
Let's kind of talk about, let's say maybe Barrios and Kikuchi together here. So I think we both kind of thought about them being sort of the keys to the rotation and that, they both needed sort of comeback years. For Barrios, we thought that, if he could give us a sub 4 ERA, and Kikuchi, if he could get sub 5 and maybe 10 wins, that could be good. I think we were kind of correct on both of those, or at least they exceeded those expectations. What about you?
Yeah, we said Kikuchi if 4.25 to a 4.5 ERA, that would have been a success. His ERA was 3.86, so
Yeah.
I think that was pretty good. Uh, I did mention if Barrios got 15 wins, that would be a success. He was 11 and 12, so maybe a little bit off from that, but it does seem like he was involved in a lot of decisions. So you know, flip a few to the other side there, and you're pretty close. Barrios ERA 3.65. We said a sub 4, so he was right in there. Uh, I think probably these are two of the pitchers that were a couple of the biggest bright spots, and we're pretty much bang on what we thought. Kikuchi's obviously had a much lower ERA, and he had a much. I think his season was probably the biggest surprise amongst anyone in the pitching staff.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think, we were hopeful and we were paid off on that one. Yeah. So let's talk about, we'll lump these two together a little bit here, Kevin Gosman and Alek Manoah. I think that Kevin Gosman would have a better year than Manoah and he would sniff the Cy Young. Um, I mean, I was right on the Manoah thing. I don't know. I haven't seen the Cy Young votes. I don't think they've come out yet. I don't think he's going to win this year. There's been, a couple other pretty good pitchers on the Yankees. But you said that a good season for Gosman would be a sub 3 ERA and 200 innings. Um, I think he ended up what with 316 and
Yep.
185. So
Yep.
you can say 1 point for me, not a point for you. Um, and then Alec Manoa, I think that's probably our biggest kind of miss here. That we kind of talked about him being a Cy Young candidate, and he should continue to take a step forward to improvements. Um, but we did kind of hedge our bets there a little bit and say there could be a sophomore slump. Um, Boy, was there. What do you think about those two?
I did write down, a quote, Gosman will be the better pitcher. So that was a quote I wrote down from you, and you were
Yeah.
100% right on that. Manoa, I have Manoa's name, and I just have next to it, yikes, because as bad as it was at times, it definitely took a twist at the end of the season. So that weird, Manoa's not reporting the AAA thing, and I don't think we've heard the end of this story. Saying that, I we'll see when pitchers and catchers report. We'll see
Have
if
you
he's
seen the
amongst that. But sorry, go ahead.
well, have you seen his Instagram thing that's been circulating?
No, I have not.
So Alec Manoa posted an Instagram story, I guess, of him working out in the gym. He looks like he's lost weight. He, hashtag, strong or something like that. Like he
Yeah, he's got that
looks like
hashtag. Yeah.
so he's you know, hey, he's doing what I think a lot of his naysayers said he should be doing, and trying to, just work on yourself rather than trying to, complain about it. So we'll see. I think he can come back, and if he comes back strong, then he can prove all his haters wrong, and shove it in their faces. Let's hope he can do that for the Blue Jays' sake, anyways.
Well, I think him coming back pretty much sets the rotation for next year. Ryu
Absolutely.
is a free agent and he will not be retained. So basically, Manoa, I think, fills that out. And, if he is maybe a little bit, maybe if he's like even if he is the fifth starter or the third or the fourth starter, maybe that takes a bit of pressure off him. Rob has kind of touched on that before, that he thought maybe there was a little too much. And, maybe that does stuff to, between your ears. And we'll see what happens. I really don't know. I'm kind of at a loss for words of that whole situation.
Yeah, I know.
Um, I I had said when he originally went down that I didn't think we were going to see him again. And although I was wrong on that, he came back to basically bridge the rotation to when Ryu was coming back from his injury. But
Yeah,
following that, we never saw. Once he was quote unquote sent down, we never saw him again. So we'll see. We'll see about Manoa. Hopefully he
yeah.
gets some form back of what he had in 2022.
Well, if he can make the rotation, that'll be gravy. I'm sure the Jays will still be looking for some starting pitching, but we'll touch on that, I guess, in some more free agent talks later in the off season. Another thing we talked about was the trade Teoscar Hernandez for Eric Swanson. I think we kind of thought that this would be important for the bullpen and improve, but it was a high price to pay. I mean, I think this was kind of mixed. I think Eric Swanson was pretty good in the bullpen. I think the bullpen on the whole was, a strong point of the Blue Jays. And Teoscar Hernandez, while he did, fairly well this season, was, not necessarily, well, I guess he was missed, on the offensive side of things, but I wouldn't say this was necessarily a bad move. What do you think?
Well, I think this kind of ties in with the theme of a lot of it is, the issue isn't Dalton Varsho, or the issue wasn't a particular player. It's just the losing Gurriel and Teoscar. and replacing them with guys with, you know, were not of the same caliber in terms of their hitting acumen, I think was a big hit on the Jays. I I really didn't have a problem with this trade, and I don't know, maybe because I don't have the invested maybe the time and emotional investment in Teoscar. I thought picking up a high leverage reliever was a good thing, and generally I think Eric Swanson was quite good this year. I don't really he gives every relief pitcher will give up homers, but I think Eric Swanson was, when you put him in the game, you knew what you're getting from him. You were getting a lot of swing and miss, and you were
Hmm.
getting outs, and you were getting out of sticky situations. uh, is would I do this deal again? Like, I don't know. I think you kind of have to look. These are puzzle pieces, right? And if you don't move Teoscar, that doesn't open up a spot for Springer to move to right, and
Right.
um, how does that play? You know, I don't know.
Exactly.
You're
No,
right, and
it's
Teoscar had a 2.7 WAR. Okay,
yeah, not bad.
3.0 3.0 was offensively. So he was like,
Right,
defensively
exactly.
he's not good, right?
He's
That's not a
negative
surprise to
defensive war.
anyone.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
So yeah, and yeah, so I think it speaks to a lot of what these moves were about this last offseason was they were trying to kind of trade a little bit of offense for some run prevention, some defense, some on the base paths intelligence, and maybe they swung that pendulum a little too hard in that direction, and we'll have to bring it back this year, hopefully.
Yeah,
We
I think they overplayed their hand a bit, to be honest, on that. Like,
yeah
they just went, they're like, well, we got all these other guys that could do stuff, and they kind
well
of
yeah they
carved out
relied on
the
those
bottom
four
half of
guys
that
that
lineup.
yeah they relied
Yeah.
on those four guys that I mentioned earlier, and they kind of fell through. Briefly, we talked about Nate Pearson. We said he would be a big part of the team. We were probably wrong about that. We discussed Brendan Belt, you know, being, a pretty good flyer that, maybe you would help replace Teoscar. I think that was a pretty successful sign. It's too bad that we can't have him again. But, I think we were kind of happy about that trade, and I think that worked out for us. Um, Boba Shet is an interesting one. I mean, we talked about his arbitration contract, and we thought it might help him have a good year. I don't think he had necessarily a better year than any before. I mean, he was who he was. But one thing that we did talk about was how his defense was an issue, and that he'd probably never be a good Gold Glove player, but we know he's got a good work ethic and he'll work to improvement. I think we were kind of correct on that. I think if you look at, his outs above average um, this year, I think he improved. But yeah, he's not a Gold Glove shortstop, but we don't need him to be that. Just need him to be, you know, league average.
Well, I definitely picked up that from our earlier episodes. Better defensively was something that we mentioned for Bo. And
Yeah,
that was essentially, with all the other players around him playing better defense, is there kind of some internal, competition and pressure that brings his level of play up? Bo, my understanding is Bo Bichette spends his off seasons training with Tulo, and Troy Tulowitzki was,
Tulowitzki,
oh
really?
yeah, yeah. So Tulowitzki's obviously retired now, but Troy
Yeah, yeah,
Tulowitzki, although he had some injury issues in his career, he was quite a good shortstop. So
absolutely.
he was quite a good shortstop, and maybe we were seeing some of the results of that offseason, that training and work that he put in, because I thought, Boba had he had a bunch of errors, right? But I thought he was quite good, and even when you saw, like, you'd see this play where he'd he'd get this throw off, and it maybe wasn't the greatest throw, still online, still get the out, and he seemed to make significant strides, and where we're not getting ahead of ourselves or anything, but like, this is a player that's going to get a massive contract in
Hmm.
3 years or 2 years now, I guess. But
Hmm.
he's going to get a massive contract, whether it's from the Jays or someone else. He's going to get a massive contract one way or another because he can really do everything. I think I was looking. I remember some stat basically like offensively, the only player in the majors or at least in maybe the AL that was better than him the last couple of seasons has been Corey Seager, right? So if that's the standard you're holding yourself to,
Yeah,
like,
seriously.
oh, oh man, right?
Yeah,
Like sign him up now, please.
yeah. I mean, if you told me you could have one of Bo or Vladdy, I'd pick Bo, and I think I said that at the beginning of the year as well.
You did.
So I mean, I stand by that, and I think that he's the guy that should be your franchise player. And yeah, hey, Troy Tulowitzki's no slouch when it comes to the defense, and if like I said, he can play, or he's got a hard work ethic. Bo does, and so if anyone on this team can improve himself on the defensive side of the ball, he can, and he's showing that he has been able to. Um, one other player that we kind of talked about as well was George Springer. I mean, we kind of said that he would be lucky if uh, he could be healthy. He's kind of the quintessential leadoff guy, and maybe the move to right field would help keep him healthy and give him more at bats. I believe that's probably turned out true. I didn't look exactly at his games played this year.
I
Trying to
have
look
that
at it
number.
as we speak. But
So he played
154.
150. Yeah,
Yeah.
154. So
Yeah, that's
that
pretty
is the
good.
most games he's played since 2016.
Yeah, that's I mean, exactly. So point for us on that one there, and hopefully that can hopefully he can improve his hitting a little bit. I think he moved out of that leadoff spot for a little bit this year. Um, so there's a little bit of questionable there, sort of future there. He's not getting any younger, but I'm happy to have him. He's a good sort of clubhouse guy, it seems, and you know, we'll be happy to see him next year. Um, I think we also, I guess, had some predictions, sort of a little more generally. Um, we thought that um, the bullpen would be kind of lights out, but the only flaw might be the lack of a lefty arm in there. Um, and I think that that was kind of correct. That the depth of the bullpen was a strength for us, and that it was probably a pretty good um, bullpen, and they were able to as it seems like Ross Atkins' sort of philosophy on the bullpen has been, let's go in with what we can at the start of the year, and we'll solve any issues at the trade deadline. And it seems like they tried to solve some of those lefty issues with Jesus Cabrera and Jordan Hicks and some others um, over the course of the season. So I think that was pretty good. Um, when it comes to other predictions, we talked about the balanced schedule a little bit, and I think one of our sort of more prescient points there was that it's probably going to help the AL East teams. I don't think you need a genius to have predicted that, but we were correct. I mean, looking at the AL East, it was uh, you know an absolute dog walking they gave to the rest of the league, and um, I wonder if they're going to try and change that, correct that in some way. Maybe we'll see. They'll give it a couple years, but that'll be an interesting kind of situation for us as being, one of the teams, in that league that has to kind of fight for, you know, the prospect of winning the division means like you almost have to win 100 games. That's kind of crazy to think about. Um, I don't know what you think about that.
Well, I think the AL East at one point the AL East, every single AL East team was better than every single AL Central team. And I remember you pointing out that it would look like the way they set up the standings, it almost looked like it was one division, and it didn't.
Yeah,
It didn't end up. It didn't end up in that way. But you know, the Yankees and Red Sox had an off year, and what you have the Orioles winning 100 games, Tampa coming out to the year, and what they won like 14 straight games or something like that.
right.
It was a bit of a crazy year, and we'll see. I think we're gonna have to see what happens in the offseason in terms of how both Boston and New York remake their teams, because they could be right back up there, and we could be, we'll probably be scrapping it out for a wild card again. But um, the AL East is, it's the beast of the East, right? So,
Yeah, I mean, we said the Red Sox would be dog shit, and they they were. We said the Yankees would be good, and we were wrong about that. But that's not gonna be the case. You know, the next few years, those teams are gonna be trying to put together um, good teams every year, and we're gonna have to keep up with them. So let's talk about the season predictions that
oh
we have.
boy, oh boy,
So
I took this one on the chin.
you did. So I said that the Jays would, I thought, a fairly optimistic 95 wins and win the division. You said they would win 100 wins and win the
Yeah,
division.
100 games.
Oh
How
boy.
crazy is that? Now saying that, if you go back and listen to that episode, and I encourage all our listeners to do that, even though there's not really much value in it, I was pretty excited. So I was shooting from the hip with
Yeah.
my 100 wins, and you know what? The April that they had, not to say that that would have led to 100 wins, the April that they had, I think it was quite good, and I
Yeah.
think you know the issues that they had popped up obviously in May and later in the season, but yeah, my prediction of 100 wins was quite wrong.
Yeah, you were also wrong that you said that they would go to the ALCS and lose to the Astros. Um, and then the Astros would get eliminated and the Jays would go to the World Series. If the
Yeah, that was
Astros get
the if
eliminated,
they
if the
yeah
Astros,
yeah
yeah. So what I said was that it would be a tight, exciting final 2 weeks, which I think it kind of was. I mean, maybe not exciting, but it was definitely tight. And I thought that they would win at least one series and get to the LCS because I thought we would win the division and then get to the LCS. And then probably get to the World Series. So we were kind of wrong there. But, hopeful optimism, stars in our eyes. Blue Jays fans, as I'm sure we'll have again this year. Any other predictions that you kind of caught out there that I missed? Um,
Well, I think we both agreed on one particular prediction, and it was what would be a successful season. And we both agreed that a successful season would be to win a series, and that did not happen. And
right.
so, by many metrics, this season was a failure, despite what, Ross
Absolutely.
Atkins or Mark Shapiro will try to tell you, whatever smoke they're blowing up your ass. They are wrong. This season was a failure, and they have a lot of work to do this offseason. And it's I have some real worries about this upcoming season, because
Hmm.
if it goes tits up real early, oh boy, it's gonna be bad. And Mark Shapiro was, if it goes bad early, Mark Shapiro is gonna wish he fired Ross Atkins this offseason, because the that Skydome is gonna be a snake pit, right?
Yeah.
And people are, if it starts going bad, and remember they've been juicing the tickets too, right? So they've
Yep.
been increasing the tickets, and if the play on the field does not match and does not meet that, people are not going to be happy.
Absolutely. And, not to mention they're not buying themselves any goodwill with some of the decisions that we're making. Even the little things like I think a lot of Blue Jays Twitter was kind of up in arms about the seats that they were pulling out of the Rogers Center there and then dumped them all into a big pile of garbage in a landfill, instead of selling them off or auctioning them for Jace Care or doing something like that. I mean, I would absolutely have loved an opportunity to have a 100 level seat, um, in my house. My boss at work, he's got a seat from the Maple Leaf Gardens in his office. It's like the coolest thing ever. It's got a little plaque on it and stuff. Like, how can you not do something like that? Like, you
Well,
just
this is detailed stuff, right? And people, good organizations get the details right. And to be honest, like while I'm back on Twitter, Dustin, I'm not very active, so I did not see that. That's obviously just a construction company doing whatever job they need to do. And I'm sure if you're friends with somebody at the construction company, they probably do have seats. And certain people do have seats in their houses because they're just going to the garbage anyway. But I
yeah,
think I think there could have been something done, like even if you sold them off at like a modest cost, right? Like it's yeah, I didn't see that, but I don't that doesn't that doesn't win people over, right?
yeah, exactly.
Never mind Ross Atkins, like that whole Ross Atkins, we talked about it. That press conference was,
Yeah,
diabolical.
yeah,
All right, well, why don't we talk about just the kind of off season a little bit, how it's going to go in terms of, I guess, how Major League Baseball has set it up. Basically, players become a free agent the day after the World Series. So that's kind of a timing for a lot of things. But the other component of that is that a player cannot sign with a new team. Although he already is a free agent the day after the World Series, he can't sign with a team until 5 days after the conclusion of the World Series. So you have about a week where basically, it's essentially, I think the idea is to give teams, the opportunity to try to, keep the players that are free agents. I don't think anything really happens that week because most of the players that are going to free agency are, they're seeking out big deals. But basically, trades are open 1 day following the World Series. All right, so we can trade Dalton Varsho the day after the World Series, Dustin. Not that I'm suggesting that, but I'm tongue in cheek. And again, 5 days after the World Series, qualifying offers for free agents are due, as well as contractual obligations and contractual options need to be exercised within that 5 days as well. So, Whit Merrifield is has 5 days before he finds out he's not being re-signed, or
yeah.
at
He's
least
not.
his options. He's not. $18 million to bring Whit Merrifield back is not happening, and but that's a particular, I guess, example of that. We have the Jays have a bunch of Gold Glove nominees, and the Gold Glove Awards are will be announced on Sunday, November 5th on ESPN. Of course, the Jays eligible are Kiermaier, Varsho, Chapman, Kirk, and Barrios. Dustin, do you think any Jays will be winning Gold Gloves this year?
Um, hmm. I mean, I could see Kiermaier, obviously. It's hard. It's hard because I don't, know the defensive, um, prowess of all the players that they're up against. I mean, I could see Varsho or not Varsho. Well, I could see Varsho, and I could see Kirk as well. I think he has a pretty good sort of defensive um, acumen there. So I mean, they're all you know on those lists for a reason, and if any of those I would say Kirk if I had to put my money down, or not Kirk. Sorry, Kiermaier.
So I am going to, in this, I'm going to take Varsho because Dalton Varsho, 29 defensive runs saved. That led the majors, not in outfielders, but of any player, any position player. He led that. So I'm going to say Dalton Varsho is going to pick up a Gold Glove this year. I'd like to see Kirk win one,
Yeah,
and not because I want Rob to, you know, not because I want Rob's blood to boil, because Rob just flips it and says, well, maybe that ups his trade value, right? That he's a smooth operator, that Rob.
sure,
But
sure. Chixie.
I I I'd like to see Kirk win a Gold Glove because like you're a kid from Mexico, you're not drafted or really, he's just an international free agent, and whatever, however his major league career ends up, whether he gets it back on offensively, back everything back in order, but like maybe he doesn't. Let's say, right? Let's say he's just a below average offensive catcher, but at the end of the day, you want a Silver Slugger award and you want a Gold Glove award. Like
Yeah,
how cool is that, right?
absolutely. Yeah, no, I cheer for Kirk. I like him. I think he's the kind of cheerable player out there, but there is some flaws there that are easy to pick on, and you know when things happen like the Moreno stuff, it makes it worse.
Well, yeah. The flip side of it is, I guess again, we're talking about this retrospectively. So Kirk
Yeah,
was coming off an All-Star Silver Slugger season. So
absolutely.
now the baseball winter meetings are December 4th to 7th in Nashville, and I'm sure the general managers will talk about some stuff there. And I guess the last thing I want to touch on, any players eligible for arbitration. The hearings are held at the end of January, from January 29th to February 16th. So basically, I think Vladdy might be up for arbitration this year again. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
so, and then pitchers and catchers will report anywhere from February 13th to 15th.
Okay. Well, a lot to look forward to.
Well, Dustin, I think that's all the time we have. Thank you very much for joining me.